Now that you've cut your characters out, you have the wire. Don't forget to tape the pieces together. We have the one long wire for the arms, and then we have one where the crisscross is in the middle. And then turn where the feet would be forward, and we're gonna nail that down to the block. And we talked about before, make sure your nails are not in the same grain of wood, because sometimes that can make the wood split. So usually I put these on at a slight angle. We're gonna use the electrical nails. I like to mark where they go and then hammer it down without that in there. Then slide that in, and you can bend your character out of the way. Hammer that down and then put him back. Okay, and you'll do the other one too, and you'll be ready to start the newspaper. So I have one that's already done. If you have extra wire down here, you can cut this out before you get going. I'm just gonna leave this one for now. So for the newspaper, we're adding thickness because we're taking this from a 2D character to 3D. So from the side, we want to be able to see that he has some thickness. We don't want flat Stanley. So I'm gonna start with the body. What I would recommend is taking a full sheet of newspaper and crumpling that up. And kind of start with that. It'll work a lot easier if these pieces are connected rather than trying to add, say, just a little chunk here and there. They tend to fall out. And then you can kind of see where this fits. I am working on Shaggy. He's not quite that big, so I'm going to take some out. I can use that later. You do want to pack this in kind of tight because the plaster is kind of heavy. So wherever it lands on the paper is where it'll be. So you want this to be very close to the shape you want. I'm going to put this in between. This will help kind of hold it there for me. And if I crumple that in there pretty tight, that's about how I want him to be. So I'm going to take masking tape to hold it into place. Try not to make a tape mummy. That's not what we're wanting to do. We just want to make sure that the newspaper stays. Sometimes, depending on your character, it'll take a little bit more, and that's okay. Okay, so I have that in there. Might have another one down in here, but I do put that on there, excuse me, pretty tight. If you have some curved areas up in here, you might need to cut the tape in half. Oops. And especially if you have, like, where the head's gonna be, the tape is really thick, or it's too wide, might make it really boxy. So I'm just gonna cut these in half. I'll use that. Make this go over here. Okay, and make sure you look at it from the side while you're building to make sure it is round and still not kind of flat. For the head, let me take this. He has kind of an ovally head. So we'll see. It might be pretty close. Stick it in there and make sure, kind of looking, I'm making mine so this is the front. Make sure that you're kind of building that way. Pretty close, so I'll use these skinny strips that I have ready. Okay, and I'll fix up his head a little bit more there too. Looks like he needs a chin strap almost. The plaster will add some thickness, so keep that in mind. Then I'm going to show you how to do legs and arms. You don't have to add newspaper for that. If you have somebody with really skinny arms, when we get to plaster, you can put the plaster right onto there and it'll stick just fine. But if you need a little bit more thickness, I'll show you how to do that. So depending on how big, I'm probably going to rip this, I think, just in half. And then crumple that up. You can kind of crumple it into a strip, because what we're going to do is spiral this around the leg or the arms, wherever you need it. And if you wanted to add more thickness past this, you could just do it again. You can shove them up closer together, kind of see what works for your character. So I might have that, and I'll tape that up in place. So I'll tape the top. Right in there. And I think I'm going to squish them up just a little bit. When you get down to the feet, if you have really big, like, clown shoes, you could use newspaper. If you have something very small, not very profound, you can do that in plaster later. So it's up to you. You'll have to decide what you want to do. Make sure where any of the limbs connect that you actually have some filler there in here. If you have someone that has a super thick neck, you could add a strip around that to kind of fill that gap in. I'm going to rip this off down at the bottom. Then I'll put a piece of tape down here too. Okay, so I have that. If you have a character that is going to be like, maybe like this, somewhere in there, that's something you can do after you plaster. Just when we put the plaster on, pose the character that night and let it dry, and it'll be in that position. So you don't even have to worry about that right now. So while you're figuring out your arms and things like that, they can just be straight out. It's a little bit easier to work with. Next step, we will add plaster.